From Victorian times to steampunk's glow, the 19th century is where we'll go. Learn Hutton's moves and impress your friends with the weapon in use as the sword age ends. Hello friends, Lauren back with you, and yeah, some of you said, sure, you'd like to see some 19th century saber. So that's what we're going to do today. Today will be part one of saber lesson. Now, let's preface this by saying I'm not specifically a saber expert, but I've been doing a lot of saber lately, and a lot of it will come from Cold Steel by Alfred Hutton from the 1880s. This book has diagrams and information and practice drills. It's a really good little manual. If you only want one thing to learn about saber, you can pick this up. It's small, it's easy to read, $11 American. That's what I paid for that. So that's pretty good. A great resource if you can get your hands on Cold Steel by Alfred Hutton and you want to learn some saber moves. Particularly good if you do, steampunk, reenactment, Victorian stuff, late 19th century. Then, having saber is pretty good. Now, in our classes, we do add a little bit more in some of the classes from, let's say, a Roworth or an Angelo or a Taylor. We go to other sources. We're going early 19th century. We're looking at some Regency stuff, but a lot of it is informed by Hutton because this is the end. This is the end of our historical European martial arts and manuals and stuff. Not specifically the last thing ever, but this is the end of the age of the sword. By 1914, the start of World War I, cavalry, well, it's becoming obsolete against, machine gun fire. It's really difficult. And sabers at that point were mostly for charging and thrusting on horseback. If you had a saber on your hip, maybe you were an officer or sergeant, non-commissioned officer, maybe in the artillery. But firearms were improved enough and fast enough that swords weren't really much of a battlefield thing. And by 1914, what we get is a real change in warfare. So a lot of the information from a military officer like Hutton, who did train officers in how to use saber, well, it's becoming obsolete, but it's still a lot of fun to practice, and we can see the similarities between this late 19th century saber fencing and things that go into Olympic fencing and modern day sport fencing that we get. So there's a nice connection as well. So if you do sport fencing, this is a nice look back at some earlier style. If you do only HEMA stuff and you want to do sport fencing, saber is always a nice way to kind of get a little bit of both worlds in there. So when we talk about saber, and I've done a video about saber before, we have to identify the parts of the actual sword here. So what do we have? We have, of course, a grip and a pommel, the end, the back strap. We hold it with our thumb pointed toward the shell. So the guard on this is called the shell, or hill, or a few other names for it, but there's our guard. We point our thumb. Our hand is kind of curled slightly around the back here, thumb pointed, and then we have the blade. Of course, fort for the strong, foible or weak, but I'll probably use strong and weak just because it's consistent terminology with other videos that I've done. Strong, weak, parry with the strong, attack with the weak. Same principles apply. Now when we stand with our saber, stand back a little bit. There is first position, where we have the saber with the back edge or false edge facing to the outside, and we have it down. You can have your hip up. You can have your hip on your hand. You can have your hand on your hip. Now, a lot of Hutton's drawings have the hand kind of fist on the hip here. You could have it behind you. You could have it in front of you. And I switch up quite a bit. Sometimes I have the hand on the hip and I'm looking like the images in the manual. Sometimes I will have my hand in front because from using other styles of martial arts, I'm used to having the free hand be able to work at things. Of course, you don't want to necessarily grab a saber because this is a light, fast weapon and you probably cut your hand if it were real. So getting that into play, not so much in this system. So if we look at it strictly from the manual's point of view, we will go into a rusting medium, which means the shell of the rapier is kind of resting by our thigh, our elbow is tucked in, and the point is low. There, then the medium position, which is kind of our ready, where we have the point kind of pointing towards the throat or face of the opponent. That's where we start. And first thing we need to do is look at guards. Now, there's a little drill that we're going to do, and this will help you kind of practice your transitions. So your guard transitions will be, if you're in your medium, if you turn the shell to the outside to your right, if you're right-handed, or left if you're left-handed, I suppose, but turning it out with the point still at person, kind of up, defending your body, not necessarily straight up. You want it out a little bit because you want to cover yourself, but you still want to be a threat. This is tierce. If you move it to the other side, if you move it the shell facing to the left, covering your maybe the inside line, outside, inside, then we can call it quart, or cart, or quarta. There are different pronunciations I've come across. I like quart because it's Q-U-A-R-T-E, but also cart is pretty good as well. Feel free in the comments to say what you think it might be called. Now, if we step back a little bit, there are some other guards that we're going to do because we have tierce, we have quart, and we have septime and second. So we are using the long true edge of the blade as our parrying device. Depending on where the cut is coming in, we want to catch it and have it slide to the strong of our sword. And we can do drills back and forth. So you would go tierce, cart, septime, second. And you'll notice that I'm not doing big motions here. Sabers are lighter, faster weapons. You don't necessarily need to overextend. This goes back to the video where I was demonstrating with the saber, defend your zone. In saber, our zone is a little bit narrow. So from the, let's say from forehead or just top of the head here, it's only out because our left leg, in this case, because I'm right-handed, is back. Our body is slightly angled. Our zone is small. I am only making small movements. So cuts from above, which we'll talk about in a second, I only need to get to here to defend them. And the point is almost staying in the middle. So if we define this rectangle, we're kind of making a triangle with our defense. Our point is just kind of floating around the center point, and we are defending to the edge of our zone. We are not pushing out. If we push past the edge of our zone, like I said in the previous video, we're just giving energy to the opponent's sword to then come back around, do a disengage, and get us anyway. So we want to keep the defense tight. When we look at cuts from below, a lot of them are to the knee, so our defense below is really just defending the knee. So these are our four guards: our tierce, our cart, our septime, and our second. Our 3, our 4, our 7, our 2. So a lot of the terminology, I like to think of it as kind of sort of Italian that makes it into the system, but it's not anything we recognize from modern language. Of course, this is late 19th century. It's adapted from some Italian sources. Hutton is building his system. He admires Italian stuff. It's all in his manual. So we've got the terminology from there. No pronunciation guide. So if I say quart or cart interchangeably, you'll know that it's this kind of fourth guard position. So that is a good warm-up exercise with footwork. So if you would advance with your stutter steps, and if you've seen my other videos, you know stutter step, leading foot moves forward, trailing foot moves after, and if you're going backwards, well, of course, then the foot that's closest to the back is going to lead. So if we are here, when we defend, step back. It's always a good idea. This gives you time, because moving back gives you time, distance. You basically can manipulate time. By creating that space, I can then stop the incoming attack. I've got it. I'm controlling on the fort or strong of my saber, and then there are moves that I can do from there. Okay? So we practice with movements, get our footwork going, and I would say saber is 95% right foot forward. I'm not going to say 100% right foot forward. Some systems are. There are the occasional times when you're stepping where you may need to pivot with your left foot a little bit. Not for this video, of course. But there we go. So you can do your warm-up practices. Remember, keep your guard down tight. Don't back into all of your other gear in the room and make it fall down. Okay, that's just a brief little, you can do footwork and transition drill. Of course, your static guard position, just when you're practicing solo, you might need to move a little bit to intercept. So you might be raised up a little bit. Your point might be in a slightly different position. What you do standing in a guard position and actually parrying might be a little bit different. Be prepared for that when you actually practice with someone else. But to practice with someone else, you also need to have someone who delivers the cut. So we'll look at 4 cuts in today's video, and future videos will expand on all of this. The cuts are pretty simple. A lot of the times in my past videos, you might have seen me refer to cuts as 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that comes from Hutton's system. And that's what we use at our club, because it's easy to remember if we just do the same cut sequence through all the weapons we do. It means that we can study various ones and people really get that idea. So if you've done longsword and we've talked about cuts 1 through 8, we're using Hutton's system, and it's a little different for saber than for longsword, for example, because cuts 1 and 2 are aimed at the cheeks in particular. So cut 1, you're imagining you're cutting through the left cheek of the opponent. Cut 2 is the right cheek of the opponent. You are attacking and stepping forward with your cuts. Cuts 3 and 4 are rising cuts to the knee. Because the right leg is predominantly forward, you are cutting to the knee. So cut 3 to the left of the knee or inside, cut 4 to the right of the knee, and that's the opponent's right, not your right, the opponent's right or outside of the knee. Okay, so the right side is their outside, and so we're cutting outside on cut 4, also doing cut 3. You can also do a cut 3 rising to the cheek. It's really tough to do a cut 4 because if the person is right-handed and you're right-handed, you have to cut past their sword arm to get in there. So we don't typically do a cut 4 rising to the face, but we'll do that. Cut 3 can be on. And there are different ways to cut. A lot of saber benefits from being wrist and elbow together in cuts so that you are fast. But you can cut from the shoulder. You can get your whole body mechanics working, especially if you're doing solo drills or moulinet or windmills. Then yes, 1, 2, you can get your whole body into it. And that's a good warm-up exercise for your cuts. And then as you move on, you reduce the movement in your cuts and you make the motions smaller. And again, it is an X shape that you are cutting. 1, 2, a narrow X, 30 to 40 degrees towards the cheeks. And then we are doing the same coming up, but we're making an X centered on the knee. So it's a little different from longsword stuff that you may have studied or other medieval and Renaissance sources, because we are specifically looking to get to the knee. Right? So that is just a basic overview and introduction to Hutton's military saber. Cold Steel being one of the manuals that he wrote about this. There's also other things in there like bayonet and stick. You can find a lot of great stuff in there. So it's not all saber. It does cover other martial arts. And you know, bayonet on the end of a rifle is an extremely effective weapon, especially against saber, because that bayonet attached to that rifle has a reach advantage. It's very much like a big heavy spear, but it packs a punch. You land that thrust with a bayonet on a rifle or a musket, depending on the time period. That's a lot of energy. Yeah, it takes a lot of practice and it takes some muscle to make it work, but it's really cool, and that is also in the Cold Steel manual. But that was just a little brief lesson. We will come back again next time and look at some other guard positions. We will be using different edges. We will be in different positions looking at how we counter certain attacks. We will also add cuts 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8, the ungentlemanly cut. We will talk about all of that. So stay tuned for the next video on Sabre, where we will talk more about the different techniques that we can use in our solo drills, warm-ups, do a full moulinet, and look at things that we can do against, if we have a sparring partner, some slow, safe training in order to build up our skill, our strength. We really do need a lot of forearm muscles and get those tendons working. So training is very important for Sabre. And we'll revisit, of course, our footwork, because footwork is always important. It's always a priority. Should always practice. Even if you don't have anything at hand, practice your footwork. Just a couple minutes every day. Make sure your knees are bent. Make sure you've got your balance. Close your eyes. Feel your balance. That's always a good little technique to make sure that you've got your knees bent and your feet in the right position for doing any kind of martial art. Close your eyes. See how you feel. If you feel stable, you're good. If you close your eyes and you feel a little wobbly, probably need to check your posture and your balance and how much bend you have in your knees. Anyway, friends, that is all for today's part 1 on Hutton Sabre. Do remember, like, subscribe, and of course comment, because your comments help shape the content of the channel. And I can't make videos if I don't know what you want to see, because the videos are for you. A gift from me. Anyway, take care, stay safe, and keep on swinging.